Good morning. Welcome. You know, at this point I'm standing here waiting for you guys to sort of settle down a bit and relishing in it, the opportunity to stand here and stare at how many people are fitting in this room? 1,000 people, every one of whom loves what I love. Every one of whom I can talk with, and you, of course, feel the same thing. Talk to your brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers. So thank you all for coming. Before I introduce myself, I want you to know who's going to be standing up here for 3 days. I want to just make some announcements, technical sorts of things. First of all, please remember not to use cameras or video cameras, including cell phones, during the lectures. And also, there are streaming rooms and YouTube, free after the event, so you can capture it that way. My name is Neil Goldsmith. I'm a social psychologist, a psychotherapist, a public speaker. I wrote the book Psychedelic Healing, The Promise of Entheogens for Psychotherapy and Spiritual Development. And I've been working with, but not for, MAPS for many, many years because I love them and share the mission. A little bit about me. You should know, I did my dissertation research at Princeton University on the utilization and adoption and diffusion of policy research, implementing it. And so it's a natural, really, for psychedelics work, of course, because that's what we're all trying to do, is get that wonderful research that's now being done implemented. I do salons and conferences, including the Horizons Conference with my Horizons Conference, Kevin Balkdick, right over there, who is doing everything here for us in the background. Everything you see that seems so seamless, Kevin has done it. And we have the same partnership for the Horizons Conference in New York, every Columbus Day weekend, Horizons, Perspectives on Psychedelics, a non-academic research conference, kind of similar to this, but only plenary sessions. So I welcome you and invite you to join us there too. As a psychotherapist, I believe that neurosis is the natural unfolding of human maturation. I don't believe in neurosis, even though it rhymes with psychosis. I think it's just stage issues that in our stage-like development, we hit the vertical part of the stair and find it difficult to get up to the next level, but then we do. So we don't want to pathologize it and we don't want to medicate it. And I got that perspective. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because I got it from my use of psychedelics, from being able to see more clearly, almost like the miner's helmet with a light on the forehead. Wherever you look is illuminated. And when I looked inside, as most of you probably have as well, I became clearer and more mature myself, and then it influenced the way I see the world, the way I see personality, human development, and clinical theory and practice all comes really. The way I do those things, comes from my use of psychedelics. So I'm very dedicated to the MAPS mission. And I want to share with you a little bit about MAPS while I have the bully pulpit here. In your packages, these are all things in your package. I want to draw your attention to the Zendo write-up, which has one of the most beautiful 4-step ways to deal with difficult trips. Principles for psychedelic harm reduction. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I draw it to your attention. A safe space. Sitting, not guiding. Talk through, not down. Difficult is not bad. What a beautiful set of ideas that comes from MAPS. This is the newest MAPS bulletin. And again, I don't work for them, but I do recommend that you subscribe to MAPS to help out in that way. And if you do, you'll get this journal. And I want to share with you just some of the titles in this current issue to give you a sense, again, what MAPS does. Psychedelic Studies, Implications for Psychiatric Research and Care. A New Era for Psychedelic Medicine by Amanda Feilding, who'll be speaking later. Why We're Donating $5 million to MAPS by David Bronner. Yes, David. And if I had $5 million, I'd do it, but he's donating in the same way that I'm donating for the same reason, and really for the same reason why we're all here. Being Present for the Journey, Experiences of an MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, Psychedelic Renaissance, Historical Factors on the Future. Research Update, Phase 2 Clinical Trial of Marijuana for Symptoms of PTSD. Research Update, a second one, Psychedelic Group Therapy in Switzerland, Peter Gasser. Understanding and Working with Difficult Psychedelic Experiences, the Zendo people. A Really Good Day, Eilid Waldman talks about microdosing. And Fundamental, there's a crowdsourcing initiative for psychedelics research that again is in the package, and I highly recommend it to you. And lastly, I don't want to leave the Beckley Foundation, which is co-sponsor here. You'll see this also in your book. They do wonderful work. And so Amanda will be speaking later as well. So that's a little bit about MAPS and why I love them. So without further ado, I think what I'm going to do is now introduce our first speaker, Dr. Rick Doblin. So I have a bio for the man who doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to read it to you anyway because it's important for you to know a little bit about his deep background. Rick Doblin is the founder and executive director of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. He received his doctorate in public policy from Harvard's JFK School of Government, where he wrote his dissertation on the regulation of medical uses of psychedelics and marijuana. His undergraduate thesis at the New College of Florida was a 25-year follow-up to the classic Good Friday experiment, which evaluated the potential for psychedelic drugs to catalyze religious experiences. He also conducted a 34-year follow-up study to Timothy Leary's Concord prison experiment. Rick studied with Stanislav Grof, who will be speaking later this morning, of course, and was among the first to be certified as a holotropic breathwork practitioner. His professional goal is to help develop legal context for the beneficial uses of psychedelics and marijuana, and eventually to become a legally licensed psychedelic therapist. Now, I've known Rick for 25 years. I know him to be not just the head of MAPS, who, if he didn't exist, we'd have to invent him, but also as a wonderful person. So we all support Rick's, and everyone here feels the same way about that, so I'm speaking for all of us when I welcome Rick to the stage. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. No. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here today with all of you. My mission since I was 18 years old was to become a psychedelic therapist, to bring back psychedelic research. I was deeply influenced by Stan Grof at the time, and judging by all of the people that are here at the conference and all of the speakers that are going to be talking, our culture has made incredible progress since 1972, after the backlash. This particular conference has absolutely astonished us at the interest. It's now the world's largest psychedelic conference ever, as far as we can tell. And we've got over 2,800 people who are here to commune as a community and try to figure out how we broaden what we're trying to do into the larger culture. And we all feel a sense of necessity because the perceived need is now so great. There's so much suffering in the world. The world itself is under challenge in so many different ways, including the natural environment. And at the same time of that challenge, there's enormous opportunity. The doors are opening to psychedelic research all over the world. The regulatory obstacles are being diminished. So I think it's that combination of danger and opportunity that has brought us here all today to form this largest psychedelic research conference ever. I'd like to particularly thank the MAP staff who have put this together, particularly Brad Burge and Brian Brown and Bryce Montgomery and a whole host of others. And if you could all stand up, those of you who are here in the room from the MAP staff, and if we give them a round of applause. Wow. And also MAPS' clinical team, led by Amy Emerson over there. And a lot of the results that I'll be presenting to you are due to our tremendous clinical team. One of my favorite parts of it is that Amy and many others have come from Novartis. And Novartis is the pharmaceutical company that gobbled up Sandoz, which is where Albert Hofmann started with LSD and psilocybin. So we have kind of the heir of Albert through Big Pharma back to little MAPS. Now, Einstein has said it's become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. I think what we're here to talk about is really how we expand our humanity, how we work with the unconscious, how we work with psychedelics, how we deepen and expand our humanity. And if we can do that, then I think in combination with our technology, we'll be able to make it so individuals and us as a species can not just survive, but can thrive through the coming challenges. This idea for me of the crucial nature of mysticism and the psychedelic catalyzed mystical experience, which is really no fundamentally different than any kind of mystical experience, was essential to our progress and human survival, came to me from Robert Mueller, or was confirmed for me by Robert Mueller, who was the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. And he wrote this book, New Genesis, Shaping a Global Spirituality. And his basic thesis was that we have the United Nations to mediate conflicts between nations, but a lot of those conflicts are religious-based. And if we can help people move from fundamentalism to mysticism, to the sense of our all connection, our unity, our all one, if we can help people feel that, not just know that, but feel that, then people will appreciate differences and not be scared of people that are different from them. And he was willing enough and courageous enough to endorse the idea that psychedelics could actually be helpful in this process. Now, it's not just about mysticism, it's also about other aspects of human relating. And two neuroscientists from Stanford, one of whom, Boris Heifetz, who's here as one of the speakers, called on neuroscience to use all the tools of neuroscience to focus on MDMA. And the reason was the world's populations need more compassion and empathy for one another. And the study of MDMA provides one small but potentially important step towards reaching that goal. So when this kind of call to action to neuroscience is coming from a mainstream journal, from Stanford Neuroscience, you know things are changing. In particular, Dr. Richard Rockefeller, who was a thought partner of mine before he died in a tragic airplane accident, focused in his talk at the Commonwealth Club and on our years of work together on healing PTSD, and in particular, multi-generational trauma. He saw how, as the board of advisors for Doctors Without Borders, he saw lots of refugees, lots of wars, and he felt like these are conflicts that are just passed on from generation to generation, and that there must be a way to interrupt it. And we know with epigenetics now that you can alter, within one generation, people's set points towards anxiety and fear and really do healing. So I think we are at a stage where we have sometimes thousands of years of conflicts, but it's our opportunity and responsibility to change those patterns within one generation if we can do that. Now, there's also all sorts of incredible research that you'll hear about at this conference about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy for a whole range of different disorders. And so for all of these reasons that we've just pointed, for all these potential people that could be healed, we really need to move forward with this area of research. But, so the but is not as bad as you might think it is. So there is potentially a little bit of a return to law and order and an escalation of the drug war. How much of that will actually be manifest, we're not sure yet, but we're watching to struggle against that as much as possible. But in terms of psychedelic research, I think actually the transition to the Trump administration could be helpful, and surprisingly so. So I'm not worried actually at all. One of the reasons is they're trying to end a lot of regulations. And so they're trying to make it easier for big pharma to make drugs into medicines. And so our nonprofit psychedelic drug development is sort of riding on the wave of this deregulation effort. The new commissioner of the FDA, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, said, the pathway for breakthrough drugs has had a really positive impact on the ability of patients with unmet needs to get safe and effective therapies in a timely way. And so both MAPS and Usona and Hefter, who are working on psilocybin, have been, we've submitted initial information to the FDA about our breakthrough therapy designation, and they've encouraged us to submit full applications. So I think that there is a sense that these drugs that we're talking about in these applications are breakthroughs and should be expedited through the FDA. one of the other reasons why I think we're really going to go forward is that President Trump has talked so much about helping the veterans. And that's one of his big issues. And so for us, there are a lot of people with PTSD who are from the veteran community. And there's existing psychotherapies and drugs that help some of them, but leave a large fraction of them treatment resistant and still suffering. One of the veterans in our study said, "I feared I was losing in my effort to live. I went through 3 MDMA sessions and it gave me my life back." We've also been trying to generate bipartisan support, and because of the work in veterans, Dr. Michael Midhover, who's our lead psychiatrist with his wife Annie, was 6 Minutes on Fox News and talking extremely positively. And we've been in all sorts of media, ranging the political spectrum from left to right, including redstate.com, Stars and Stripes, Army Times. So I think that we've sort of crossed this political divide and worked towards healing PTSD, not only in veterans, because there are more people who have PTSD from other causes than war, but because there is that touch with the veterans. And we've actually had firefighters and even one police officer with PTSD in our studies. So I think the psychedelic research is really going to be moving forward well, as long as we adhere to the highest scientific standards. And we've also built alliances with some of the VA, the Veteran Administration's lead researchers into PTSD. And they're also happy with what they've done, but frustrated at the large number of people that still need help. And so we're working with Candace Monson on a couples therapy study where one member has PTSD, but it affects the relationship. It's cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy. And we have permission from FDA to give both members of the couple MDMA, not just the member with PTSD. Yeah, and we're also working with Barbara Rothbaum at Emory University on prolonged exposure. There's over 3,500 therapists trained by the VA in prolonged exposure. And so if there's some way to blend MDMA with that and make people more open to go through the traditional approach, then this could potentially be widely distributed throughout the VA system. So it's these alliances that Richard Rockefeller really helped us build and overcome the resistance that we've been trying since 1990 to build these alliances with the with the VA and the DoD. But where is it going to be a little bit difficult because of the current administration? I think they're very concerned about possible crackdowns on marijuana. I think it would be a mistake for them to do that. They would lose a lot of public support. But the key issue right now with marijuana research is that there's a federal monopoly on the supply of federally legal marijuana, and that marijuana can only be used in academic settings. It can't be sold as a medicine. So as long as that monopoly exists, the marijuana in plant form can never be made into a medicine. And under President Obama, the DEA agreed to end the monopoly. And at least 14 different teams have applied for licenses, but none of them have been granted yet. So this is the area that we're going to be focusing our political work to make sure that this monopoly can end, and there is a doorway to marijuana research. And we've been working with Professor Lyle Craker since 2001. So this has been a long process, but hopefully we maybe overcome the resistance. We are doing a marijuana PTSD study with 76 veterans. We're fortunate enough that Colorado has made a bundle of money on marijuana taxes. And so they've given $8 million to research, and we got 2.1 of it for this study. It's our first government grant in 31 years. It's not federal government. But I actually did get a bit of federal money just the other day. On Tuesday, Monday night on the red eye, I flew to Washington, D.C., and I testified for 5 minutes in front of the Sentencing Commission. I testified before them in 2001, as did several of us that are here, and we were largely ignored then. And so right now, the penalties, if you are selling MDMA or selling cocaine, if you have an equivalent amount of drug, you go to jail longer for MDMA than for cocaine. And so it totally doesn't make sense. And the Sentencing Commission had a staff member who remembered the testimony that we gave in 2001, and he invited me back now that they're thinking to reconsider this. So whether this sentencing guidelines will be changed is also one of the things that may or may not happen, and this is where we have to try to keep focused and keep working politically. But The other area that's a little bit concerning right now has to do with psychedelic harm reduction. And so we have developed what's called the Zendo Project through Lene Ponte and others who have helped us build it up. And this is a project trying to envision how we handle a post-prohibition world. What do we do? Where would the backlashes come from? A lot of it would be young people having difficult experiences. And that happens a lot of times at festivals, and people aren't prepared. And so we have teams of people that are trained to offer compassionate support at Burning Man, at Envision, places all over the world. But there is a law, the RAVE Act, that criminalizes this activity in some ways. And so we're trying to overcome that as well. And so this is another area that there will be struggles ahead to help this expand. But in terms of the scientific research, we're really in a great shape. So we are trying to make MDMA into a medicine. And this will give you a sense also why I think it's going to work out. This is shocking statistics. This is as of June 30th, last year, 868,000 veterans are receiving disability payments for PTSD. And over 1.4 million veterans are receiving disability payments for mental health related disorders related to their time in the service. That's an enormous burden of suffering, but it also is an enormous financial cost. So using 2004 numbers, that's the last time the VA put out their numbers of what the annual cost per veteran is. That was $20,000 in 2004. But what that means is that there's about $17 billion at least every year that the VA puts out towards disabled vets with PTSD, and almost $29 billion a year for mental health related disorders. And when President Trump talks about how he's going to increase the military budget by 10%, $54 billion, more than half of that is going to pay from the VA just for the emotional costs of war to people who are veterans. So this is an enormous burden on the federal system, and I think they're not always motivated by compassion, but they can often be motivated by money or saving money. So this struggle to make MDMA into a medicine, you know, MDMA was a medicine before it was a party drug. It was a medicine in the middle 70s to early 80s. It was also being sold as ecstasy, and the crackdown was inevitable. And I learned about MDMA in '82, and we started organizing the psychedelic community to prepare to deal with this eventual crackdown. And in the summer of '84, it happened. And this is a picture of me spying on the DEA. That's me in the right before I walked into the door to totally surprise them with a petition asking for an administrative law judge hearing to protect the medical use of MDMA. They had no idea that MDMA was used therapeutically. They only knew about it as a recreational drug, ecstasy. We won the lawsuit, but the DEA administrative law judges only make recommendations. They don't have the power to compel. And so the DEA administrator rejected the recommendation. Then we won a couple times in the appeals court. Eventually, the DEA figured out how to keep MDMA illegal and satisfy the appeals court. It took them a while, but they figured it out. And so it meant to me that the only way through was through the FDA, through science, through medicine, through healing. So I started MAPS in '86 as a nonprofit pharmaceutical company focused on psychedelics and marijuana. What I didn't realize that at the time, no drug had ever been made into a medicine by a nonprofit. That didn't happen until 1999, and that was the abortion pill, RU486. And so that gave me a lot of hope that actually finally nonprofit organizations had got it together to move through the regulatory system. And since then, there's been a lot more nonprofits that have focused on drugs that for one reason or another are not financially appealing to the pharmaceutical industry. Now, we have since, starting in 2000, worked with PTSD, and we've done studies in the United States, Switzerland, Israel, and Canada. We've treated 107 people, and we've gotten tremendous results in these small phase 2 pilot studies where you're looking for your methods, you're looking for the doses, you're looking for your outcome measures. And so the results that we got from these studies were pretty astonishing. Now, you do these controlled studies, and we're comparing therapy either with an inactive placebo or low-dose MDMA versus therapy with full-dose MDMA, active dose MDMA. So it's not what you might traditionally think of as a placebo, because the control condition is the therapy. And we have to show that the therapy itself really benefits from the addition of MDMA, because if you could do it with the therapy pretty well and the MDMA doesn't make that much of a difference, then why take the risk of adding a drug? But what we showed is 23% of the people in our study who got the therapy alone or low-dose MDMA no longer had PTSD. It's a testament to the power of therapy. It's roughly 40 hours of therapy with a male-female co-therapist team. But when you add 2 sessions of MDMA, the benefits more than double to 55% of the people no longer had PTSD. And these are chronic treatment-resistant PTSD patients. And then when you add a 3rd session, and this is 2 months after the last MDMA session, it's up to 61%. But the real question is, does this last? Is this like a psychedelic afterglow? Is there long-term change? And so at the 1 year or more follow-up, we're up to over 2/3 no longer have PTSD. So something, it's fantastic. Something fundamentally is changing in people's brains and their emotions through this therapy, and the benefits increase over time. So I'm going to give you now a 2-minute video of one of the MDMA therapy sessions to give you a sense of how MDMA actually works. This is Nicholas Blackstone, who was in the book Acid Test, and this is from his first MDMA session, and he was dealing with rage. He'd never beat his wife, but he got angry a lot, he threw stuff, and this was one of his presenting symptoms. And so he's going to talk a little bit about that while he's under the influence of MDMA with Michael and Annie Mithofer. It's not working. Here we go. Well, do you know how to make it work from over there?
I thought I was being a peaceful person, but I didn't realize how much I was punishing that aspect of me. I think maybe in Iraq I saw what it was capable of, and I think I was too afraid to, and a part of me just feels like so bad that I did that to him. I mean, I know it's me, but I just describe it wisely.
Part of you.
Yeah. But I just, that's really amazing. I don't know, I just got this amazing sense of just, I guess, wisdom. I really don't know.
Sounds a lot like wisdom to me.
It was really amazing. And even when I try and think of that really rageful aspect of me, like I can't even, I know it's there, but it just doesn't. I really feel like so much more at peace with everything.
Great.
Like even if I try and think about Iraq and everything, like I somehow feel like really peaceful about the fact that that's my journey. And that,
yeah, thanks for sharing that.
part of me I know this is part of the part of the drug, but when I try and think, am I going to be able to hold on to this this understanding, this somewhat of wisdom, this knowledge that I have now? I mean, just asking myself that question, I feel like it's so profound that I don't think I could really forget it.
Wow. I think you can see in a way how how he's processing that's not that different from normal consciousness, and so I think it does help to make it something that does last, that you can integrate it. The lessons that we learned in phase 2, we learned a bunch of lessons. We learned that we can work with PTSD from any cause: childhood sexual abuse, complex PTSD, war-related PTSD. We can enroll anybody that has got chronic severe PTSD. We also learned, to our surprise, and this was my dissertation was based on figuring out how to do the double-blind problem, and it turned out I was wrong. But I thought low-dose MDMA would be the key because it would increase the blinding, and we saw that it did, but low-dose MDMA had an anti-therapeutic effect. It activated people, it didn't reduce the fear, so it's not actually a good control condition. And so we're going to go to inactive placebo. We demonstrated safety in clinical conditions, and we showed a medium to large effect size. And this helped us figure out how to design phase 3. So we brought all this data, 16 years of data, starting in Struggle in 2000, to the FDA meeting November 29th, 2016, an end of phase 2 meeting. We had the New York Times primed. So the next day there was an article reporting the good news. The FDA agrees to new trials for ecstasy as a relief for PTSD patients. Of course, we wish they would have said MDMA instead of ecstasy. And then the New York Times sort of condenses the daily news into the daily briefing, which you get on your phones or email and stuff. And this was their daily briefing for the day. Trump transition, Standing Rock, MDMA. No, the first two make you need the third. We just had on Monday and Tuesday here our investigators meeting for phase 3. We're bringing people from our 14 different sites, Israel, Canada, and the United States, and we use the opportunity of this conference to start preparing them for the initiation of phase 3. This is the design. It's 3 MDMA sessions, 1 month apart, with 12 non-drug psychotherapy sessions with a male-female co-therapist team. Each of these non-drug therapy sessions are about 90 minutes. 3 for preparation, and then 3 for integration after each MDMA session. So one group gets 80 milligrams the first time, supplemented by half that, 40, after 2 hours, and then they can choose whether to go up to 125 or stay the same. But they don't know exactly that. It's just they say, I want it stronger, I want it the same. And then they're compared with the therapy. And the FDA has approved this design so far. We've had a protocol that we submitted. We got comments on March 8th. They've agreed to some of these key elements. We have still some more discussions to go with May 11th, our next meeting. And we anticipate by around July that we should have an approved phase 3 protocol and ready to go. Now, we've done a lot of work on the costs. The key driver for the cost is the number of patients that you need in the study. And so if we get the same effect size, a medium to large effect size, as we've got in our phase 2 studies, we might be able to do this with just 200 patients. And the FDA has agreed that we're going to be able to start with 200 patients in 2 100-person studies. And we're estimating that that's going to cost around $20 million. This is our America First plan, meaning focusing just on the MDMA, on the FDA, I mean. And now, if the results aren't quite as good as we thought, the FDA has permitted us to do an interim analysis, and then we would get information, add X number of people to your study, and then you get statistically significant results. So if the results are not quite as good as we anticipate, then we will be able to do it, we think, with 300 subjects. And if it's that small to medium effect size, that'll cost around $25 million. If we do get medium to large effect sizes, for $25 million, there's the possibility we could get it approved both by FDA and European Medicines Agency. But we haven't started negotiating with the European Medicines Agency until after we've come to agreement with the FDA this summer. And if we have this small to medium effect size for 450 subjects, we think we could do it for $35 million. So somewhere between $20 and $35 million, we should be able to get MDMA approved in the US and in Europe. And now we're starting to think even broader than that, or global. This is hypothetical, we haven't checked it all out, but for around 50 million, 700 subjects, we think we can get it approved in pretty much every country of the world. Now, we already have $10 million, thanks to Ashana Haley and David Bronner and thousands of other donors who brought us to this point. So it's not inconceivable that we will be able to raise the rest of the money. I really think we will. And the way that FDA will permit this to be a medicine is not like a normal medicine where anybody can prescribe it. They have these risk evaluation and mitigation strategies called REMS, and we're proposing that it's only be able to be prescribed by people that we've trained in the therapy, that they know how to do the psychological component, because it's not the drug, it's the drug-assisted psychotherapy, and it will only be administered in certified clinics. It's never going to be a take-home drug. as therapy. It's only going to be used under supervision, and there'll be certain safety screenings initially for who can be in the study. So this is how it'll start, and then it will expand. And the way structurally that we're going to do this is that we've realized that one day, once we start selling MDMA by prescription, that could be a possibility of selling it for a bit more than what it costs us, and then with those profits we can use and invest in more research. But that's something that you can't keep inside a nonprofit. There has to be a for-profit taxable entity. So MAPS has created the MAPS Public Benefit Corporation. And what happens here is that people make donations to MAPS, MAPS invests in the benefit corporation, and then the benefit corporation will sell MDMA. And the key thing about the benefit corporation is that it's not about maximizing profits, it's about maximizing social benefit. And the only investor in the for-profit benefit corporation is the nonprofit MAPS. So that's our structure. So we're going to be focusing just on donations. There's no private gain here. It's all about trying to really improve the health of our society and help us all survive. This is just our, the FDA gives data exclusivity for drugs that are off patent and for which there are no use patents, which means nobody can use our data for 5 years. And if we do studies in pediatric populations, extra 6 months, which they're requiring us to do. And so I'm just showing this slide to say that in the first 10 years, under conservative assumptions, we're anticipating $53 million worth of profits that can be reinvested in research. So our story to donors is you help us get a jump start on getting MDMA as a medicine, and then a lot of this will be able to be self-funded. Here's the psychedelic clinics of the future one day. This is a beautiful one. One day you'll go to Google Maps and you'll say, where is a psychedelic clinic? And you'll get this. This is also a jobs program. There's over 61 hospice centers in the United States, and every town that has a hospice center, I think, will have a psychedelic treatment center, thousands and thousands of them. President Trump is talking a lot about jobs in coal. Jobs in coal have been diminishing, but in 2021, when we get MDMA approved and psilocybin is approved by USONA and Hefter and ketamine clinics, there'll be at least 500 full-time jobs, and over time, there's going to be more psychedelic jobs than coal jobs. So, so this is the real jobs of the future plan. This is where we should be focusing, alternative energy instead of coal. One of these jobs I hope will be mine. My psychedelic therapy license. Started my real career. Whether this really comes to pass is due to those of us that are here. We've got the world's leading psychedelic researchers and the community that's supported that. And so how we proceed from this moment. So please use this conference as a way to refine what we're all doing. Ask your best questions. Be really responsive to the fears and anxieties of the larger culture and see how we can address them. And if you see any questions that you want to ask of any of the speakers, or formally or not, let's just use this opportunity as a way to refine what we're doing. So really bring your best, most critical, but open-minded, open-hearted selves to bear on the conference over the next couple of days. And then if we do that, this will become more than a dream. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yay. Thank you. Wow. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Stan.
Dr. Rick Doblin.
It's all from Stan.
Stan.
Wow.
Did I tell you, if he didn't exist, we'd have to invent him? The person who's perhaps contributed the very most to the new psychedelic renaissance that we're experiencing now. The single largest contributor among many, many, many contributors out there. So Rick, thank you once again. It's my pleasure now to introduce you all to Amanda Feilding. Apparently you know her already. That's nice. Amanda is the founder and director of the Beckley Foundation, which she established in 1998 to further research into therapeutic and transformative potential of psychoactive substances forbidden by prohibitionist policies. Through the scientific program of the Beckley Foundation, Amanda undertakes collaborations with leading scientists worldwide, investigating cannabis, psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, DMT, and MDMA. These include clinical trials identifying the effects of psychoactive substances on cerebral circulation, brain function, subjective experience, and clinical symptoms. She co-directs the thriving Beckley Imperial Research Program with Professor David Nutt, who will speak later. I'll turn you over to the very capable hands of Amanda Feilding. Thank you, Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Well, it's lovely to see you all here, so many of you. And the long hibernation of psychedelic research forced upon us by repressive laws is hopefully drawing to a close. Since we last met here 4 years ago, a tipping point has been reached. Cutting-edge research has demonstrated the value of psychedelics. Phase 3 clinical trials are on the horizon. People are being treated with psychedelics in a number of clinical trials, and the possibility of turning these compounds into licensed medicines looks well within reach. My own journey in this field began when I was introduced to LSD in 1965. This was at the beginning of the cultural explosion following the escape of LSD from the labs. A short while later, I started working with an outstanding scientist who was the first to develop a hypothesis describing the physiological changes underlying altered states of consciousness. For me, this was a turning point. I suddenly understood how LSD and related compounds could be used for the benefit of mankind to dive into the deeper levels of the psyche and to enhance cognitive functioning. It is obvious that the human animal is an amazing species, unique in its capacity to rise to the top of the pile and take control. But it is equally clear that we are incredibly flawed and have some deep fault line in our makeup, which makes us capable of the most incredible stupidity and cruelty. Why this is so and how we can remedy it became my dominant thoughts. The late 60s were a wonderful period. They seemed to open up the potential to change the world and the human psyche for the better. We were riding a flood of optimism of what LSD and related compounds could do. We felt sure that with greater understanding of the human condition and how it could be enhanced with the responsible and careful use of altered states of consciousness, we could help heal the sicknesses of humanity and make the world a happier place. However, with the advent of the 70s, the war on drugs wrapped its tentacles around the dancing hippies and the youth playing with their altered states of consciousness and flung a sizable number into prison. Here, in the land of the free, which comprises roughly 5% of the world's population, now has a staggering 25% of the world's prison population, largely made up of drug users. One might imagine that the right to control one's own consciousness, or the very core of one's personality, would be protected as a human right. However, maybe the founding fathers never imagined that anyone could question this right, and so failed to mention it. LSD had threatened too much, too quickly. Tragically, due to mishandling and paranoia, society has had to wait 50 years so far for the realization of the extraordinary healing power of psychedelics to break through the repressive network of misinformation, fear, and vested interests. I realized then, as the doors of prohibition slammed shut on these valuable compounds, that the only way through the globalization network of taboo, which seemed almost impenetrable, would be, with the very best science, to carefully demonstrate the potential of these compounds to heal and to enhance the human psyche. In order to open the doors to scientific investigation of these substances, in 1998 I set up the Beckley Foundation to change the policy preventing the research, to raise funds, and to gather a team of scientists with whom I could work to kickstart the studies again. It has been a long uphill struggle, and we're nowhere near the top yet, but the views are getting better and better each year. What I thought back then, I continue to think today. The importance of psychedelic research is because psychedelics can reach a deeper level of the psyche than mere talking therapy. They can remove or weaken the defensive mechanisms of the ego and allow the individual to dive deeper into his or her consciousness, fishing for hidden trauma and/or facilitating a transcendent and spiritual experience. In the last few years, we have broken new ground in our understanding of how psychedelics do this. How it is they shake the roots of the human psyche and reboot the setting of our consciousness, and how it is they are such deep curative medications. Throughout our research, we are finding that these compounds reduce the censoring controlling power of this specifically human mechanism called the ego, or in modern neuroscientific terminology, the default mode network, in short, the DMN. This network of hub centers is superimposed upon all other networks in the brain, and rather like the government or the conductor in an orchestra, dictating what gets through to consciousness and what does not. The result is that in our normal consciousness, we see a highly censored reflection of reality, like Plato's shadows on the wall. When the trauma happens, the ego raises defenses and closes off the blood supply to the brain areas associated with the trauma. Talking therapy can only skirt around these repressed areas, unable to lance the boil and to let the poison out. But with the aid of a psychedelic, the defenses are lowered, the blood returns to the troubled areas and washes out their poisons, freeing them up to become part of the whole again. With the clinical trials and brain imaging technology, we are revealing for the first time how psychedelics are non-specific medications, meaning that they can treat an amazing wide spectrum of illnesses, which are often treatment-resistant to any other currently available medications. Apart from healing sickness, psychedelic compounds such as LSD, psilocybin, and ayahuasca can increase those beneficial characteristics of humanity, such as compassion, empathy, openness, and creativity, those qualities that make humans noble. All these qualities can blossom under the influence of a wisely used psychedelic compound. How is it possible that these amazing compounds, which have this ability to heal and to enhance, and that have been used for millennia from the very beginning of human cultural evolution, have been excluded from the modern world's pharmacopoeia? Why have psychedelics been criminalized and categorized as substances that have absolutely no medical benefits and the highest potential for abuse? Substances such as LSD and psilocybin have very low or no toxicity and very little evidence of harms. Indeed, an overdose of LSD has never killed anyone, unlike an overdose of alcohol, which is easily reached. The reason is deeply entrenched taboo and political expediency. Perhaps we are now reaching a new portal where slowly society is beginning to realize the potential benefits of these compounds and their value in the treatment of currently intractable psychological conditions suffered by an ever-increasing proportion of the population. Conditions such as depression, anxiety, and addiction are a mounting burden for society that are highly costly in terms of suffering and government expenditure. Although we are making major breakthroughs, because of the legal restrictions and lack of funding, we still have a long way to go. Occasions such as this here today are an opportunity to increase our connectivity and to find new ways forward. In order to break the taboo and better regulate the psychedelics, to minimize harms and optimize benefits, we should begin with removing the classical psychedelics and cannabis from Schedule 1 to a lower schedule. So that scientific research can be carried out without expensive and time-consuming obstructions, and so that doctors can prescribe them to individuals in need. We need not be far from realizing this goal. Independent governments can do this. The opening of clinics which could provide psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy would allow at least some of the millions suffering from the scourges of psychological disorders to seek treatment. Our own research, and that of others, have shown remarkable improvements found in patients receiving just 1 or 2 doses of psychedelic medication. This is unheard of in contemporary psychiatry, which relies on daily doses of medications that often have unpleasant side effects, or on regular therapy sessions that can continue for years. I am excited at what lies ahead. Later this year, I look forward to starting a microdosing study with LSD, and also a study investigating the efficacy of LSD for treating alcohol addiction. We will be furthering our ayahuasca DMT and 5-MeO DMT studies, as well as developing our cannabis research and formulations of cannabis medications. I'm committed to expanding our neuroscientific and clinical research, making these compounds licensed medications, setting up clinics at which they can be provided, as well as simultaneously removing the shackles of prohibition and enabling the immense beneficial possibilities of these neural transformational medicines to flourish. I hope you all have a wonderful conference, and many congratulations to the Great Maps team who have coordinated this whole happening. Thank you very much.
Amanda Feilding, Beckley. Yeah, I think of Amanda sort of in a way like as the Rick Doblin of Europe, because of her tireless work and her iconoclastic approach to things. So thank you very much. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the third plenary speaker this morning, the third member of the triumvirate, Beatriz Labate. Beatriz Labate has a PhD in social anthropology from the State University of Campinas in Brazil. Her main areas of interest are the study of psychoactive substances, drug policy, shamanism, ritual, and religion. She is visiting professor at the Center for Research and Postgraduate Studies in Social Anthropology at Guadalajara, Mexico. She's also co-founder of the Nucleus for Interdisciplinary Studies of Psychoactives. She is author, co-author, and co-editor of 16 books and 1 special edition journal and several peer-reviewed articles. Bia has been, to the Horizons Conference in New York, a friend, sort of a silent partner in a way, advising us mostly on the ayahuasca part of our program and being essentially a curator and an advisor. And so I just wanted to thank her publicly for that incredible role in contributing to the Horizons Conference as well, kind of like what she's doing here today. So I'll turn you over to Bia Labate. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos días. Un saludo muy cariñoso para nuestros hermanos del otro lado de la frontera, nuestra querida Norteamérica. A very warm greeting to our brothers and sisters on the other side of the border here in the USA. Hello to everybody who's watching us on live stream everywhere in the world, especially my friend Alex Geary in Australia. Welcome 3 a.m. to see us here today. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's a real honor. We've worked at least 1 year to put this conference together. So I'm the curator of the plant medicine track, and I'm also responsible for several community forums in the conference. So in Psychedelic Science 2013, we had an ayahuasca track. And this year, we're having a plant medicine track. That was modestly an idea I had, and I lobbied with Rick and Brad, and they accommodated my idea, so thank you. I've also lobbied that the plant medicine track be as double the size that it was supposed to be, so we had an extra room, and we're having 2 parallel plant medicine tracks, so we're taking over. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Brad. Yeah, so I'm happy because, we're expanding the number of species that we're including in our psychedelic menu of research. And I'm especially happy that we're including several presentations about peyote this year, which we didn't have on the last edition of the conference. Peyote is a sacrament, is a plant teacher, beloved, respected cactus from this native to this land. So it's great to include finally peyote here in our discussions. Just let me give a disclaimer that the idea of plant medicine is a little bit loose and kind of all over the place. So it encompasses both the plants themselves and the substances derived from the plants. So that's a topic for discussion. It also encompasses mushrooms that are not plants. But in any case, we are including here, so ayahuasca, DMT, peyote, psilocybin, mushrooms, ibogaine, cannabis, salvia, and the mysterious toé from Peru. I think that I'm just going to give you a short explanation on what the plant medicine track is, and then I'm going to say, what do I think that this discussion has to add to the global scene of psychedelic science. So the track basically includes 3 dimensions. One dimension is the most obvious one, that is biomedical research, health research, about the findings of the therapeutic potentials of plant medicines. The second dimension of the track is social sciences reflections and findings on the healing potentials of psychedelic plant medicines. And then another third dimension that is even more cool is a kind of meta-reflection, a self-reflection on the nature of the field of psychedelic science, on the history of medicine, on the history of psychiatrists, and on reflection on topics that are hard and dear to all of us that are engaged in scientific research about plant medicines. I think that the plant medicine track adds a lot to this field, and I'm going to name a few reasons why I think that we're contributing to this. First of all, we're trying to reclaim the M in MAPS, making it more multidisciplinary, and so we're including other disciplines, and especially anthropology, That is, I think, is a big, contribution of this edition of the conference. The other one is that we did try to be more inclusive. So we have some indigenous voices, and in this regard, I'm especially proud and happy to announce the presence of Sander Iron Rope. He's back there. Thank you for accepting our invitation. He's the former president of the Native American Church of North America. I kind of against all odds, I invited him and he ended up accepting. He's from the Sioux tribe in South Dakota, and we have also other indigenous voices that were, yeah. Indigenous Voices Incorporated. There's the OSF program that gave some grants to marginalized voices to attend the conference, and they gave out, I'm not sure the final number, but a bunch of people are coming from different places in the world to attend this conference. Also, I'm happy to say that because of the plant medicine track, the balance between men and women is more equivalent throughout the conference. Go girls! And also, I'm also happy that the plant medicine track has given space to voices in the global south, particularly and here, I'm sorry to be patriotic, but a lot of Brazilians, because we're doing very amazing, awesome research in Brazil that doesn't get a lot of attention because, of the zip code of the researchers. It does influence, it does play a role, but Brazil has the legal use of ayahuasca allowed for religious and ritual purposes, and we have blossomed an amazing field of study of ayahuasca in Brazil. I wrote a little piece in my HuffPost blog called "Is Brazil the New Epicenter of Psychedelic Science in the World?" So a lot of people don't know what's going on there. I just want to mention our colleague Draulio de Araújo is conducting an amazing 3-year rigorous study, a clinical trial to study the potentials of ayahuasca for the treatment of depression with 80 patients. They follow almost 1 week each patient, both from the ones that drink ayahuasca and the placebo ones. And he's gonna talk about this, some of his research findings. And we have also Stevens Rain. I kind of can't really understand exactly what he does because he recreates mini brains on the laboratory and gives the substances to test the effects. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there. And still on this note on, diversity and inclusion and other disciplines, I want to point out some of the contributions that I think that the plant medicine track is doing to this whole debate. First of all, a very blunt statement. I want to say that not everything is about molecules and active principles, but plants matter. The whole plants matter. And I think it's important that we discuss in our research, differences between ayahuasca that is frozen and dried or ayahuasca in liquid form, analogs, pharmahuasca. We should also be looking at the continuities and discontinuities between mushrooms and psilocybin or iboga and ibogaine and so forth. We should also be discussing topics like methods of administration, for example, psilocybin oral or injected, and things like that. And as I said, I think, a basic premise is that we have to hear a little bit what traditional people have to say about the substances that we are now researching and studying. And, not read to only hear them in first voice and hear what they have to say about these substances. So I'm very much an anthropologist that talks to psychologists and medical doctors and psychiatrists and stuff. And I think that we have always good to remember something very basic, that healing, it's not just about the efficacy of a substance. It's not just about a pharmacological principle and that efficacy inherent to that. But healing depends on relationships. Healing depends on context. Healing depends on the relationships established with other people and with the larger environment, or why not say the cosmos. So we have a lot of presentations that are addressing this topic. We also have presentations that talk about the placebo effect. For example, how is the placebo effect framed and shaped by clinical trial methodologies, and how could it be framed differently? What kind of a problem is the placebo? And a whole new set of questions that I want to point out is that we have to think about the context of production of scientific knowledge. Science doesn't happen in a vacuum. Science happens in a specific social, political, historical context. And as we have seen very clearly in the presentation of Rick before, the current context is a context of prohibition, and that is a context of stigma. And I think nobody from any political spectrum can deny the fact that all investigation done about scheduled substances suffer from very strong burdens and hardship and lack of funding and challenges in researchers' career. So I think it's part of our mission to discuss this sort of topic and to remind that the science and the findings we're presenting here are done under this context, under this legal and political context. The other aspect that I think is important to discuss, that not always comes to the surface of the table, is the personal experiences of researchers. So we have some presentations that discuss this sort of thing and how the personal experiences of researchers can and have helped them design better research protocols. And related to that is, if we're envisioning psychedelic therapists, what is the training of the psychedelic therapists? Are they going to be able to take the substances? Are they going to train it on themselves? That's kind of a basic rule coming from the ayahuasca world, that whoever is giving ayahuasca to others should have had personal experiences. Does that translate into the context of MDMA or psilocybin therapies? We have to discuss that, and we are discussing that, and that is something that I find also very exciting. The other point is that, and here I'm mixing a little bit things of the plant medicine conference, but also a track, but also the community forums and the conference as a whole, is that we don't have to run away from addressing complex and controversial issues. For example, all the problems related to the global expansion of ayahuasca, the legal problems, the safety problems, the problems of commodification, sustainability, and so forth. So these topics are also included in community forums and addressed openly. And the community forums are a very good venue to advance a real dialogue and bridge between practitioners and scientists. So we need to educate scientists about, the cultural sensitivities of their work. And likewise, we need to open practitioners' mind to understand better what is scientific research, and perhaps find and work to find ways to collaborate and to work together in a better way. So in one line, we need to promote a dialogue between science, culture, and society. And Psychedelic Science Conference, Psychedelic Science 2017, is doing this. I would like to conclude by telling that we have done a very cool partnership between Psychedelic Science and an outlet called chacruna.net. That is a website that publishes short academic articles in a kind of accessible way, trying to bring scientific knowledge in more accessible terms. And we have published already maybe 30 articles of the speakers that will be present on the conference before the conference, and we'll be publishing some more afterwards. So I feel we're like, you know, in Chacrunanet, but not only on Chacrunanet, we've planted all these seeds. We have been spreading all this, you know, flowers that are now starting to blossom. And I think that everybody that is here now feels this excitement that there is something historical going on. There is some kind of momentum. There's some kind of vibe. We are on, you know, we are on the ascension. And I think we have to be very proud because our ancestors started that work and we have all been working hard to be here. And if we feel this joy, it's because we worked hard for it. And we're going to keep on working because this is a good and true cause. And yeah, so basically I'm you know, going to conclude by saying that the psychedelic plant medicines are our friends, they're our allies, they're our family. We are all part of the same family, and they can teach us, they can heal us, and they can challenge us. And so I welcome you all to Psychedelic Science 2017. We're here to learn, we're here to have fun, and we're here to change history. Thank you.
So wonderful. What an amazing person. What an amazing professional. Thank you, Bia. Thank you.